Like, patriarchy is a real thing. I just want to say that my feminism will be intersectional.
Morning! Hi! How's everyone? Are you good? Awesome. Did you have fun last night? In the whatever you did. I appreciate all of you that came out. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled and honored. And for hearing those clinics. We got about 25 or 30 people to sign up to go to the city council meeting with the clinic local, so that's good. It's our last day. It feels wrong. I know, but have you had a good conference? Convening, gathering, what are we calling it? Sleeper cell? Can we call it the public interest sleeper cell? We're just like in it, in the bunker, creating change, and we're gonna explode on people and blow their minds. So a lot's going to happen today. It's going to be super fun. Hopefully many of you are staying for the concert tonight, which is going to be really cool. I'm very excited about that. A lot of really interesting people. We get to find out who our Frank Prize finalists are going to be today. And we're going to hear from some really, really incredible people. I, as always, have been super inspired by all of you. Thank you so much, because you're literally, as researchers, your work helps me regurgitate back out. And like I said last night, can somebody please just validate my hatred of just certain people? I just need to know that, like, I am morally superior to some people who walk among us. And if somebody else could figure out how many calories you burn blocking people on Facebook, that would be helpful too. Just a couple of things I need from you as researchers before we go out to our prospective places. All right, kicking off is an incredible artist and designer who works in interactive mediums, just trying to figure out how you can use tools within your own website to really, really make a difference in what you're doing. A lot of people really misuse social media, their websites, and aren't the most effective with what they do. He's an incredible artist who is, his work is at the Museum of Modern Image, the Tate in London, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, and he's going to talk a little bit about how we can recorrect the way we misuse communication and how we can use design to really make a difference. Please welcome to the stage, Nick Breeze!
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Oh. Hey, yeah, my name's Nick Breeze. I'm a new media artist. And what that means is I make work with and also about the technology that's come to define the age we're living in. So I'm excited to kind of talk about some of my perspective, especially here. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a very inspiring week. So just start off with an example. So this is a piece, a collaborative piece that I worked on with a bunch of folks at my agency, Branger Breeze, and it's called The Charge for Privacy. And it's an iPhone charging station, and sort of inscribed around the plexiglass are the terms and conditions for this charging station. Hard to read on the back of that panel, but this is what the backside says. This is actually taken word for word from Facebook. We just swapped their name for ours. It says, you grant Branger Breeze an irrevocable, perpetual, non-exclusive, transferable, fully paid, worldwide license to use, copy, publish, stream, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, any and all of the images received. So it says that because this charging station is free in the same way that so many of our online services are free, in that rather than paying with money, we pay with our data. So there's a screen on the other side of this box, and when you plug it in, it says phone detected, charging your phone, downloading all of your photos, projecting them in the gallery. And as you might imagine, not everybody reads the terms and conditions, so they're surprised to see that their photos are being projected. So we glitch them and we blur them a little bit before projecting them. We're not trying to invade anyone's privacy, but we're trying to get them to think about this stuff. That's sort of the idea. So I hate terms and conditions, not just because they're impossibly long and difficult to understand, but because of the actual terms that we're agreeing to. So take Facebook, for example, and I'm oversimplifying here a little bit, but the deal ultimately boils down to this. They give us a platform to chat with our friends and upload photos, as though that isn't something we can already do everywhere else. And in exchange, we give them all our data, like a lot of data. And this data is really valuable, and not just for targeted ads, which is what I think a lot of us are familiar with, but it's today in the age of like machine learning and artificial intelligence. This data is used to train some of the most powerful algorithms that have ever existed. our data is sort of like the oil that fuels these machines, and we sort of just hand it all over. I think that this is because we don't totally understand the value of our labor. I mean, of our data, like we do our labor, right? If I asked you to come over to my house and mow my lawn, you'll probably say no, or maybe you'd say how much. And if I said, I'm not going to pay you anything, but all your friends are there, right? I would hope that would be your reaction, but the same isn't true when it comes to negotiating our data. We know how to negotiate our labor, right? Because we know what it's worth, but not so much our data. And when I talk about this sort of stuff, oftentimes people, I get this reaction, which is like, well, that's fine, I get it, but I don't care if Facebook and Google have all my data. That doesn't bother me. What I hear when I hear folks say that is, I don't fully understand the implications of handing over all of my data and the way that these platforms can now influence my behavior online as a result of all this data mining, the way that my feeds are different from everyone else's, my options are different, how the prices I get are different, right? And as somebody who's been working in this space for a while, I do think that generally we are starting to understand the implications behind this deal that we've signed on to more and more. I think the recent elections, the situation with Facebook has been a recent wake-up call. It used to be the case I used to ask folks, I also teach, I'm an instructor at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago, and I would always start some of my classes with students saying, like, how does Google and Facebook make money? And people used to just stare at me blankly. Now I get a bit more informed answers. So things have gotten better, definitely. But still, this exchange far from perfect, right? When sort of artists and activists like myself make a big stink about privacy, it's not because we have something to hide, right? Which is oftentimes something else I hear. It's because we've noticed how our agency is slowly being eroded, how we're losing this agency in our online lives when we're participating in these platforms. And it's sort of, when you look at it this way, that deal sort of makes you feel like a sucker. Mark Zuckerberg used stronger language. He calls us dumb fucks. I don't know if folks are familiar with this exchange. This was early days of Facebook when he was chatting with a friend about how all the early users just trusted him with their data. Folks who are familiar with this exchange might say, like, Nick, this isn't totally fair. He was young. He was in college. Surely leadership at Facebook isn't as insensitive these days. Then this happened. Folks know about this. So I'm taking sort of some low blows here. So ad hominem attacks aside, my point is just that I think it's really important to think critically about our participation in these platforms online. We need to think, why are we giving them this data? Who are we trusting our data with? What data exactly are we giving them? And again, what are the implications of all this? So. And this is another area I've seen a lot of progress, right? I've seen a lot of folks recently leaving Facebook, sometimes quietly, sometimes making a lot of noise. And I think that's become a little bit of a cliche these days. But 4 years ago, when I left Facebook, I also made a lot of noise. I decided as an activist and artist, I needed to turn it into an art project. And I made a video series where I talked about why I left Facebook, but also, more importantly for our conversations today, how I left Facebook. So. When I decided to leave, I wanted to download all my data. I had 7 very wonderful years with friends online on Facebook, and I didn't want to lose all those memories. And Facebook gives you an option to sort of download some of your data, but not all of your data. And so that bothered me a bit. And then also, I wanted to delete all of my stuff, but I didn't want to deactivate my account, which sounds weird, but because of the work that I do, I had my account associated with a whole set of apps and projects that I had worked on for clients and other folks, and I couldn't really compromise that, so I needed to sort of just erase all my stuff off the surface of Facebook, but kind of leave the account, the shell of the account kind of there so that I could use it. And that also, obviously, isn't an option on Facebook, so I sort of made that option for myself. I wrote a bunch of code that would allow me to sort of leave Facebook on my own terms and conditions. And so this is from that series where I show you how to use that code should you want to leave on similar terms and conditions. So I wrote some code that would first let me download all of my data and then would sort of delete all that data off the surface of Facebook. So untag myself from all the photos I was tagged in, delete all the comments that I made, unfriend all of my friends, and just leave kind of like a ghost of an account. And this is actually from the video where I show you how to download all of the photos, including the photos that your friends tagged you in, which is part of the data that Facebook doesn't easily let you download. And that's sort of what I'm calling tactical misuse, which is not a real term. It's just something that I use to describe the way that I work sometimes. And with this kind of hyphenated version of misuse, what I mean is using platforms in ways they weren't necessarily designed to be used, which sounds easier said than done, because we should ask ourselves, like, how do you misuse a platform that is so carefully designed to control the way you use it, right? Like a platform that was designed with users in mind, with a user interface designed with users in mind. So the trick is avoid this area in red. Just don't mess with anything in Facebook, and instead focus on this area, the rest of the browser, which kind of disappears when we're on Facebook and these platforms. But the browser, as a digital artist, the browser is my absolute favorite app ever for like a whole list of reasons. Glad to get into that in the recess session. But one of them is because of how malleable the browser is. There's a lot more you can do with this interface than we realize. So like take the address bar, for instance. Typically, we just use that to request websites. You could actually inject code in there that interacts with the page. So that one-liner will like change the page red, for example. Or like that set of code, say you're on a page with sort of uncomfortable imagery. You could, replace it with something more pleasant. I don't know if folks have ever been in this situation. You land on a forum with a post you want to read, and you're blocked with a gray wall that says you have to log in with Google or Facebook before you can read it. What I do is I right-mouse click that box. I choose an option called Inspect Element, which opens up these developer tools. These are tools built into all of our browsers. You have this in there. It's made for developers to debug their code, but you could also use this or misuse this in interesting ways. So for folks who know CSS, adding one little line of code, the words display none, which I'm about to do right there, sort of magically makes that box disappear, and then you could read the article you came to read. Similarly, I don't know if folks have been in this situation where you want to download a photo from Instagram, and unlike every other website, you can drag and drop a photo from Instagram, or you can't like right-mouse click and save it. But if you inspect that element and use those developer tools, you can just copy the URL to the image, open up a new tab, paste it in that tab, and then save it from there. So this is sort of what I'm calling tactical misuse, right? Sort of using these tools, like these developer tools that are really meant for debugging, but kind of using them for our own alternative reasons, and getting platforms like Facebook or Instagram to, getting them to do things that we want them to do that they don't necessarily want us to do. And that's sort of how I did that entire Facebook project, just sort of tactically misusing these tools. So I'll stop picking on Facebook and maybe talk about a few other platforms for a sec. So this was a collaborative piece I worked on with a longtime collaborator and my girlfriend, Anna Russet. And Anna has a fairly large following of young women and girls online, and all the work that she does directly engages with them and their lives online. And one day she was showing me these tweets that fangirls make on Twitter. So takes like celebrities like Justin Bieber and the members of One Direction have these huge followings of kids online. And when they log on to Facebook, they'll occasionally just sort of randomly follow one of their fans back or message them, almost as a kind of gift to their audience. And these fangirls know that. So as soon as they notice them go online, they just immediately start tweeting, please follow me, please follow me, please follow me, please follow me, over and over and over again to see if they could be that lucky one that one time. And what they've noticed is that Twitter really quickly just blocks them, right? Because they're sending the same tweet over and over and over again. So they've gotten really clever. And what they started to do was use emojis and numbers to both make their tweets first much more like just a lot prettier and more noticeable to that celebrity, but also to add variation between the tweets to evade Twitter's spam detection. So we thought this was absolutely brilliant. Young girls paving the way, as they often do, changing the rules. And so we analyzed all of their tweets, and we kind of like broke down the formula that they had kind of collectively created. And then we used this as an opportunity to teach them a little code and get them excited about this kind of tactical misuse. And we essentially sort of took what they were doing and turned it into an algorithm. And then we created a tutorial for them, and we showed them how to use these browser tools and this code that we've written, and sort of following some simple rules, they could just kind of automate that process. And then use their time to do something like learn a little bit more about code. I don't know how many folks know this term, API, stands for Application Programming Interface. Like the browser developer tools, this is another tool that programmers use to build apps online. specifically when they need some access to one of these platforms, either data or some other functionality. So these are tools actually produced by those platforms. So if you've ever seen an app that has like a Facebook Connect, that's using the Facebook API. If you've ever seen an app that uses like Google Maps integrated into the app, like Lyft or Uber, that's using the Google API, the Google Maps API. So those APIs could also be misused. So this was sort of like a weekend project, a little experiment. As you might imagine, it bothers me that Google reads through all my emails and all of my docs. And so I thought, I wonder if I could use the Google Docs API to create a separate app, my own Docs app, where I can create my apps. And then before I upload it to Google Docs, I'll encrypt it with a password. So all Google sees is a bunch of like jarbled text. And then when I want to work on that doc, I just reopen it and decrypt it with my password and sort of keep going. And it worked. This was a little just weekend exercise in tactical misuse. So this is another project with Anna that Anna and I collaborated on. We've both been on YouTube nearly since the beginning. We love YouTube, absolutely. So inspired by that community over the years. We've discovered some of our favorite artists on YouTube. But over the years, more recently, the algorithm that sort of YouTube uses to recommend videos, like when you land on the page, but also when you're subscribed to other folks, has gotten worse and worse for so many reasons. I won't get into details. But this article came out last week in The Guardian about the role that the YouTube algorithm might have played in the last elections. As it turns out, Pizzagate conspiracy videos play better on YouTube than the alternative. So the algorithm has learned to sort of reward those and prioritize those, whether or not you follow those sorts of channels. There's sort of a larger bias for those. And so I was chatting with Anna once, and she was saying how these days when you upload a video to YouTube, it feels like you're stuffing it in a bottle, throwing it in the ocean, and hoping it washes up on somebody's shore. Oftentimes it just gets buried by the algorithm. So we decided to use the API to make that shore. So this is a project called CurrentTube. The website is actually current.tube. And the idea here is we use the YouTube API to just bypass their algorithm altogether. So what you're seeing here, so this is a real-time feed coming from the website. What you're seeing here is every time somebody uploads a video to YouTube, a bottle falls from the sky. So those are videos being uploaded right now, this Friday morning. And you can click on them and then see kind of what that video is. And then you can click on that thumbnail and watch that video. Who knows what these are, so I won't click on them right now. But again, kind of like using our digital masters' tools to dismantle their house, so to speak. Yeah, that's the website. So that's kind of the idea behind tactical misuse. I just kind of want to end on this slide. This is a quote from Doug Rushkoff. He says, "Ask any kid what Facebook is for, and he'll tell you Facebook is here to help me make friends. No, they're looking to figure out how to monetize people's relationships. If you don't know what the software you're using is for, then you're not using it, but being used by it." And the idea behind all this stuff is really just to kind of get folks to think about our platforms this way, kind of thinking critically about our platforms and not be afraid to kind of play by our own rules and kind of experiment and learn in the process and hopefully reclaim a little bit of agency. So thanks, everyone.
That was awesome. Nick Breeds, everybody! Also, Nick is going to be doing a recess session that wasn't in your books. He's going to expound upon this, have a longer breakout about it. And so if that is something that you want, when we go to recess, there will be a Frank Ambassador with a sign that says Nick, and he will take you. So that is awesome. Also, I can't believe those Pizzagate videos. Like, I can't believe Pizzagate. Anyway, I can't. Anyway. Okay. I am really excited about our next speaker. Tania, she worked for Hillary here in Florida as the director of digital strategy. And now she's the communications director for Jolt, a Texas-based nonprofit working to increase Latino civil engagement. And she did this amazing Quinceanera-themed action that was a gigantic statement about how diverse groups really participate in our economy and help it grow, and also emphasizing how important dreamers are to our economy. I met her the first day I got in. I was like, this beaming face walked up to me. And anytime young beaming faces walked up to me, I'm so excited. And she was just this beaming face. It was like, oh my God. And I was like, oh my God, you. And she's like, no, oh my God, you. So please welcome to the stage, Tanya Mia. Tanya.
Is this the clicker? Oh, sorry.
The big green button.
Okay, got it. Hi, everyone. Last year, the tiny Latino civic engagement organization, JOLT, did something remarkable. Working with youth, we brought national attention to Texas's discriminatory law, SB4. We did this through a performance protest put on by 15 young women called Quinceanera at the Capitol. The protest landed JOLT on the digital front page of the AP. It was picked up by outlets around the world and across the country. And it also spurred a movement of young Latinos ready to take action on the issues that they care about. But before I talk about the protest, I'm going to talk about Donald Trump. Donald Trump's election victory was a huge surprise for me, like it was probably for many of you. And it was also very personal, not only because I had worked here in 2016 to get his opponent elected, but also because his campaign was an all-out attack on immigrants and people of color. When I was a kid, I was undocumented, and while my dad and I were able to fix our immigration status, my mom waited in line for 10 years, and my family was eventually separated from her because she was undocumented. So Trump's victory really hurt. I felt like half of the country was rejecting people like me because of the color of my skin, because we were immigrants, and also it obviously hurt as a woman. And I also felt like Trump and his administration were giving young people like me and millions of others across the country a new identity as criminals, as lazy, and really as unworthy of being in this country. So after he won, all I really wanted to do was be around others like me and go back to my community and feel that comfort. And that's what really motivated me last year to go to Texas and help my friend Christina Sansoon launch JOLT. But Trump's election also motivated another group of people to do something entirely different. It really emboldened his base to continue these attacks on Latinos and people of color across the country. And one of those people was Texas Governor Greg Abbott. So last spring, Greg Abbott took a page from Donald Trump's book, and he signed a law called SB4 on Facebook Live, on Sunday night. It was really crazy. And that law was really serious because what it did is essentially it allowed local police in Texas to be able to ask anybody that they just came into contact with for proof that they were here legally in the United States. And if the police found, if somebody couldn't prove that they were here legally, the police would then be forced to turn them into immigration enforcement for detention and deportation. The law put millions of immigrants in Texas, thousands of immigrants in Texas at risk for deportation, but it also made people really scared to come into contact with police. In Houston, Texas, last year, crime reporting among Latinas fell by almost half. And in a state where 40% of the population is Latino, it made millions of people the targets of racial profiling. The law was really designed to disrupt immigrant communities and to intimidate people of color. And it's probably no surprise to many of you that Donald Trump not only endorsed the law, but his administration and Jeff Sessions really held it up as an example for the rest of the country to follow. So we launched JOLT in the wake of these attacks on our community. And our goal is to increase Latino civic engagement in Texas. So 1 in 3 eligible voters in Texas is Latino, but unfortunately our community doesn't turn out to vote. In 2016, only 40% of Latinos went to the polls. And for young people ages 18 to 24, who will soon be the majority of Texans, that number is closer to 30%. So we're working to change that by delivering leadership training so that young people in our state will be ready to lead Texas. And we're also starting JOLT chapters across the state to teach people how to self-organize around the issues that they care about and also register their communities to vote. There's no similar effort in Texas right now, and we really believe that if we invest in young people, we're gonna make a difference not only in Texas, but also across the country. Now we know that the Latino identity, the Latino community in Texas is really complex, it's huge, and it's diverse. We also know that young people have really been turned off by both political parties recently. So we ground our organizing not on politics, but on shared identity and culture. So what does this mean? So what does this mean from a public relations perspective? Well, for us, it means that we have a communication strategy that's centered around lifting up our stories and showing Latino youth as positive change makers and heroes. And we do that by an earned media strategy that is centered on sharing their stories, and we're always striving to create digital content that lifts up our community. It also means that we anchor all of our campaigns on art and culture. For example, last May, we launched a campaign to keep Texas families together, and we kicked it off by painting this live mural, which we invited immigrant moms and their kids to paint. And we're also, later this month, we're gonna have an art installation at the Texas State Capitol celebrating Dreamers, and it's gonna be really big, and it's made out of pan dulce, which is a traditional Mexican dessert pastry. So at a time when the government and our state are trying to erase our community, we're really striving to celebrate our culture and our identity in everything that we do. And that's exactly what we did with the Quinceanera at the Capitol protest. So for those of you who don't know, Quinceaneras are a really important Latino tradition that mark a young woman's transition into adulthood. So the idea behind the protest was to have a quinceañera at the steps of the Texas State Capitol, and then go into the Capitol to talk to a lot of the state elected officials who had supported SB 4. So to promote the event on social media, we work with artists to create really beautiful images of the quinceañeras and share why they were protesting. And the young women who choreographed the performance for the quinceañera picked some really popular songs by Los Tigres del Norte and some songs from the Hamilton mixtape. Another really important component to the protest were the visuals. So a lot of the young women wore their actual quinceañera dresses, and they were huge and puffy, and they made for really good photos and videos. So we brought all of these elements together, a nod to our shared identity, a celebration of our culture, and great visuals. We tie them to SB 4, and then we put the stories of young people of color at the center of it all. Hundreds participated in the protest. It was picked up by NPR, The Guardian, Vogue, you name it. And we worked with MTV to create a video about the protests, and it was their most watched video last July with over 6 million views. So let's take a look.
Senate Bill 4 is the bill that allows law enforcement to ask any person that looks foreign for their legal documentation. And the reason that they're saying that it's not discriminatory is because it can apply to everybody. The way that I'm involved in today's protest is I choreograph the dances, and I help teach the girls part of the dances. A quinceañera is when it's a young lady's celebration, her becoming a woman, a young woman, and her family comes together and they celebrate it, and it's just this giant party being yay, you're a woman, now you gotta be an adult and be responsible.
When Governor Greg Abbott signed the bill into law on May 7th, he disrespected my community. This hateful law violates our human rights. It will create fear and distrust in our communities, and it will tear apart our families. But I am standing here today along with these 14 strong women to tell you that we will not let that happen. Now, ladies, please repeat after me so Donald Trump and Greg Abbott can hear us. We are brown and beautiful.
We are proud and beautiful.
And we won't back down.
And we won't back down.
I think it was super effective. I think people all over the country are talking about SB 4 now.
So the protest was really powerful and it was really emotional. But it did more than just bring national attention to SB4 and JOLT. It really helped us build a movement across Texas. So after this happened, we were flooded with messages by people all across Texas telling us that for the first time, they felt hope for their communities and they really wanted to get involved and do something. So even though our organization has barely been around for a year, we've been able to build a volunteer base across the state of hundreds of people. We've also been able to mobilize thousands of people to later protest to defend DACA and other immigration bills. And we've started creating JOLT chapters all across Texas. So from UT El Paso to UT Tyler to high schools in Central Texas, young people are organizing around the issues that they personally care about, and they're also hosting registration drives. And this November, we're gonna be working with them to turn out our community to vote. And that's how we're making change, by organizing through our shared identity and culture. Thanks.
Oh, that was awesome. Oh my gosh. That is incredible. I think when you just see just having young women just declare they matter. I mean, that is just something that we forget all the time, that we have to tell people. That is the society we live in, and it's really beautiful. So, oh my God, thank you. What an inspiration. And speaking of inspirations, oh my God, you know what it's time for? The Frank Show. I know. So this is time where we're going to re-meet our 3 nominees for the Frank Prize. We're going to do it differently because it's going to be incredible, because Annie and Troy have set up this amazing talk show. I think how it's going to work is Annie and Troy are going to be in the audience. We're going to bring up Erin Hart from Spitfire Strategies, who's going to lead the discussion, game show, frivolity, rapid fire, insanity, I'm just going to say. That's going to happen, and it's going to give you the opportunity to, after hearing and talking to these scholars over the past couple of days, you're going to be able to ask questions of them. They're going to be able to sell you one last time, and then what's going to happen? You're going to vote. It's going to be super important. So without further ado, I think I'm going to bring up Erin Hart. Erin Hart, come on up with your fancy-ass tie.
My fancy tie.
Where's your fancy-ass?
Oh,
is that coming?
It's coming.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm leaving because I can't compete with your tie.
My fancy
Thanks,
tie.
Liz. You only messed that up just messed up all of that, the whole thing.
All right, everybody, are you ready for our final time to interact with not the panelists on Not the Panel Frank Show? Yeah? All right, well, we'll be interacting with you, and we'll be actually throwing things out in the audience as you'll get the opportunity to ask questions. So some of those will be a brain and a heart, the metaphor here that we're appealing to hearts and minds, which scientifically, not the greatest metaphor. Most of all the heart, as we think about it, feelings is in the brain inside here. Even the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, they're not really that separated as we think we are.
Don't
but
diss my stuffed animal.
What do I know? I'm just a scientist. So, so here we go. We are going to be bringing them out here on stage, and we are going to be throwing these to you. And I just want you guys to remember, as we're throwing these to you, even though we're throwing this metaphor, you're only going to get one. But as always, whenever we're doing these things, it's both of them together, right? Because look how cute this is. Look how cute this is, right? Isn't this the intersectional marriage that you would like to go see? So let's make sure that we're always marrying those ideas together. All right, Annie, I think we're ready.
All right, so here's our super secret special guest, Erin Hart. Chief Innovation Officer, Gator. Chief Innovation Officer at Spitfire, Gator. Excellent podium pusher, Erin Hart.
Thank you. The entire glue budget
Erin's
was not used on the podium, but for bedazzling.
Erin's going to tell you a little bit about what's going to happen while Troy and I get the stage together.
Yes, thank you. So this is the moment you've been waiting for. I'm now officially a game show host. So As Troy and Annie have shared with you, we obviously, when we're doing the work that we're doing, and I say we as practitioners because unfortunately this game show thing is not a full-time gig. I too am a practitioner. And when we're doing that, we're looking at how we do reach hearts and minds, hence our really awesome and very realistic stuffed animals. So we're going to be asking a handful of questions to each of the researchers. We're going to go through a couple of rapid fire questions because it's a game show. And then you guys are going to get to ask a few questions. You may win a prize. You may win a prize. You may not, because I'm not Oprah. There's only going to be a limited number of prizes here, people. So ask a really good question. So are we prepared? Is our stage ready? Almost. Almost. It's almost ready.
I got this all wrong.
It's working. It's okay. Do you have more you'd like to share with us?
No, just that I apologize for being so wrong.
Oh, we're good.
About what was
we're really good.
If only other people would have that same attitude.
This is true.
Should I throw one of them to the individuals before they take the question and then take it back?
If you want to. Yeah, sure. All right. Are you guys ready to welcome not our panelists, but our guests to the Frank Show? Yes? All right. I think it is time. So let's please welcome Chelsea, Erica, and Hannah.
Oh, okay. I mean, they told me that I was. So. Yeah. Oh, they told you you were a celebrity? That I was in the middle.
Excellent game show dancing. I like it. All right, are you all in your right places?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. All right, This is working. Okay, great. So round one, we have 3 questions for you to get things rolling. So we've talked a lot about the fact that it is no secret that we live in a really polarized world. So as we've had this conversation over the last few days, and we've talked about the need to connect, to bridge this gulf between progressives and conservatives, I'd like for each of you to share with us how something from your research can help us to do that. So this time we'll start from left to right. Chelsea, how can your research help us to do that?
Sure, so I think in the spirit of Frank, I'm going to tell a story instead of talking about specific research. So when my research paper came out a few years ago, my advisor and I co-wrote a New York Times editorial about our paper, talking about how liberals can better understand conservatives and how conservatives can better understand liberals. And it was specifically about the issue of gay marriage. And in response to this editorial, we got a letter from a North Carolinian pastor. And usually when I get these letters, they're kind of hateful because I talk very much in favor of gay marriage. But he said something very different. He thanked me for taking the time and listening to where he was coming from. He said most of the time he feels that he's being demonized. But we were saying, no, you have reasons behind your beliefs. We don't agree with your reasons, but you're not being evil. You're not intentionally trying to hurt other people. I think keeping that perspective in mind, keeping the perspective that we need to stop and we need to listen and understand can be a really powerful tool.
Great. Thank you, Chelsea. All right, Hannah?
Yeah. So polarization is accompanied by a set of beliefs and a set of behaviors. And so that means like people ask you, do you have friends who are Republicans, right? Like, is it okay in your group to have friends who are Republicans or who have different political beliefs than you do? And that's all sort of, you get these cues from the people around you about whether that's an okay thing or a not okay thing. Is it okay to go do these initiatives that now exist that emerged after the election, like having dinner with someone from a different political party than you? Are your friends doing that? Are your friends not doing that, right? Like, we're getting these cues about sort of, is this what one should be doing in this era? And so the research is really sort of has that in mind. Like, are we getting signals from the people around us that we should be actively doing things to address polarization? And I think we can all ask ourselves, is this what's happening for us? It's not happening for me, but I think that's the goal, is to try to figure out how to change those kind of norms for ourselves and also on the other side. But we have to start with where we are and what we're doing now.
Great.
The other side of it, of course, is that in addition to sort of living in these media bubbles, we're also living in real life segregated network bubbles. The institutions that used to bring us together no longer exist. So if we think about sort of networks being segregated, more segregated now along political lines, that's the other piece of the story.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. Erica, you're up.
I am. I'm going to piggyback on my fellow researchers, but point out that polarization is not just political and it's not just ideological. Your political identity and your ideological sort of perspectives are also really implicated in other elements of your identity, right? So who you are, your gender, your race, your ethnicity, your cultural background, your geography, right? As someone who lives in Texas, I sort of understand that very much. And so understanding the importance of identity and the different identities people bring to the table and the complexities and the contradictions that exist with those different identity categories. And so understanding the pieces of the puzzle that individuals bring to the table when we're having these conversations, understanding their gender, understanding their way, their social class, and their geographic location or their religion, or all of those things work together to form their ideological position is super important. Understanding that politics don't exist in bubbles, but that are part of the larger story that we need tools to unearth and unmine.
Well, thank you. That was a perfect pivot to our second question. And our second question is, just yesterday, Troy talked about the insights that you share and that researchers share with us as tools. Those research insights are tools that we can all use in our work. So I'd like for each of you to share with us a little bit about what you would say your tool is used for, the primary insight from your research. And Hannah, we'll start with you this time.
Oh, thanks. Okay, so I have this sort of three-part tool, right? Attention to local norms, attention to the people in a group who are best able to kind of change perceptions of those norms, and using network principles to identify those people. So my tool is really for organic, group-based behavior change.
Nice. And it sounds like it's a tiny Swiss Army knife.
Yeah,
it has many things. Yes, that has many things that flip out. Nice. I like it. Erica?
Okay, so my tool is what I call an ethnographic approach. Okay, so what that means, let me unpack that a little bit for you. It means interviewing in-depth participants. It means doing focus groups. It means doing participant observation. It means doing media scanning, right? It's all of that qualitative, deep information that we can't get from survey data or experimental data. So it's all of that other stuff. And it's not to undermine the quantitative, but to understand the value of the qualitative in supplementing and complementing the quantitative. So often organizations are data-driven, but we need to unpack that and ask ourselves, what are our limitations of the quantitative, of the survey, of the experiment, and supplement it with the deep, rich data that qualitative and ethnographic research affords.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you. Chelsea, share with us what your tool is like.
Thank you, Erin. So not surprisingly, my tool is going to be psychological. As a psychologist, one of the things that we want to achieve is we want to change hearts and minds. But oftentimes, we kind of project our own thinking onto other people. And so what we can do as psychologists is take the time, and actually what all of us can do, we don't have to be psychologists, and to kind of perspective take what the other person is thinking and try to match their thinking to how we're engaging in this dialogue.
Very helpful. Thank you. All right, one more question for this group before we go into the speed round. All right, so last question. So we have a lot of folks here in our audience who are in some way working to address inclusion and think about how do we give everyone access, and whether that's to healthcare or quality education. So in reflecting on your research, what element of it can we think about that's going to help make all of these facets of our world more accessible to everyone? And so you're first up this time, Erica.
Awesome. Okay, so one of my big takeaways is thinking globally and locally and empowering the communities that are already doing the work that your organization and your mission and vision are driving. So thinking about the people, the voices out there, the stories that are out there. So much of this conference has been focused on design and thinking about the existing narratives out there. How can you as an organization sort of tap into that and tell those stories and use your power, right? We have power in this room that we have to recognize. How do we use our power to lift up those that are less empowered? And I think there's a certain obligation and a certain calling that we need to sort of address with that. So yeah, using our power to sort of elevate the marginalized, the most marginalized, and bringing them up and including them in our larger narrative so they are not on the margins, right? So they are part of the fabric.
Great. Everyone got that?
Got it.
All right. Chelsea.
Sure, so I'm going to take a risk. I know this is Friday morning. You've had a lot of science. I'm going to try introducing a little bit more science, so bear with me. So one of the equity issues that I care most about personally is healthcare equity. So what I do as a scientist is I try to figure out over the past year, why is it that some people don't seem to care that not everyone has healthcare? So I ran a study, and what I found is that perceptions of responsibility for an illness is inversely related to how much we care, how much concern, how much harm we see. And what I also found is that conservatives were seeing illnesses as more likely to be caused by this internal responsibility. And that internal responsibility was then leading to less perceived need to help. And so it's remembering not only where do the other people perceive harm, it's also remembering that perceived vulnerability matters and it's seen in different ways. So thank you for bearing as I tell you more science. I know there was a lot really quickly.
We have both, remember?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
We can do this.
Super
Anna,
nerdy.
please.
Yeah. So I mean, as we've talked about and everyone's been talking about, these are very, very complicated issues. There's lots of things going into them. One way to think about them is to break down what's going on into sort of how to think about what are the behaviors that are relevant. So that's one piece of this. So how do we get Black women to get more screening for mammograms? How do we get kids at school to like care about homework? How do we get, we do GOTV efforts for candidates who are interested in criminal justice reform. All of those things can be broken down into specific behaviors that are rooted in communities. So one way to approach these things is to think about the pieces in terms of behavior and in terms of the groups that they're rooted in, and trying to sort of use the insights from what I've been talking about to make sure that those behaviors can be targeted directly, both the positive behaviors and the negative behaviors.
Great, thank you. All right, so you know what that means. We're ready for round 2, the speed round. Are you ready for the speed round? Woo. All right, let's be encouraging. Speed round. All right. That was really feeble, really feeble. Yeah. One more time. Speed round. Woo! All right. Are you ready?
Ready.
We're going to go from left to right. Have just a handful of questions. Mm-hmm. So first, who's your favorite researcher and why? Yes.
Okay, so I have a lot of really senior research crushes, but I want to kind of bring up another junior researcher. So write down this guy's name. His name is Matt Motyl. M-O-T-Y-L is the last name. He's at University of Illinois, Chicago. You guys should get him here next year. I'm looking at you, Annie. Does really cool work on political tolerance.
All right. Thank you.
My person is Peter Berman, is a sociologist at Columbia who thinks in structural network terms about pretty much everything. So he's mapped sort of the sexual networks of adolescence. He has done the local political structure of 16th century English elites. He studies how autism epidemics sort of become epidemics, how it's a social thing based on sort of networks of doctors who give autism diagnoses. And it's just a really kind of neat tool for looking at the world, to think of it in what sociologists call the structural terms, but it's sort of thinking about it in terms of networks.
Cool.
Name again? Peter Berman.
And thank you. I hope you're writing this down because I don't have a pen. So thank you.
My answer is Kimberl Crenshaw. She is the woman who coined intersectionality. She has a TED Talk. She is a political, legal scholar and activist. She brings the fight to the streets and to the sheets, academic sheets. Yeah. We're supposed to make you hot yesterday during 7 minutes. So yeah, check out Kimberl Crenshaw. She is one of my academic founders and crushes.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. All right, next speed question. And this is really important because this is a really interesting connection point, I think, for researchers and practitioners in the room. If you could design your dream project, what would it be? Yes, you're up again.
Okay, so as psychologists, we often try to isolate people in labs to get at the most control. But what I want to do is go to the places where people are actually having these conversations. I want to run a Thanksgiving Day study. And I'm not joking. This is me fully serious. I want to get a randomized controlled trial going where we train some grannies to have a certain type of dialogue and see if that leads to less angry tweets at the end of dinner, to lead to longer dialogue.
Excellent. Hannah.
Yeah, I'm trying to do this dream study right now, which is trying to figure out what are the best ways to use other kinds of data to identify what are the structures of workplaces that make it optimal for organizing of all sorts of kinds. But basically, how can we sort of use these insights to apply at scale for a really important goal of shoring up the labor movement.
Excellent. So Hannah's living the dream.
We're moving to it.
All right, Erica.
Okay, my research project would allow me to go to the global south. So much of what we talk about in this room is so Anglo-centric, so Western. I want the funds and the safety, more importantly, to be able to go to the global south, to the Middle East, to Asian countries, to talk to people and activists in those spaces in ways that are safe. One of the things that resonates most from when I started my research was this particular anecdote. One of the managers at the organization I was working with told me about these two young gay teens in Iran who watched these videos in fear in their closets, literally, looking for moments of hope. So I'd like to go to those spaces and talk to those people, but in my dream project, I'd like to be able to do that in a space that allows safety for my participants. So it's very much of a pipe dream.
Great,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so speed round because we want to use our time well. We're going to have time for just a few questions from the audience. So the scribbles that you've been making for the last couple of days, the things you've been saving, now is the time for those. Keep your questions short. Thank you for bringing up the studio lights. And raise your hand if you have a question, please. And either Troy or Annie will come to you with a microphone.
Is this mic on?
No.
Boom. Minus.
Troy's this.
Is there a switch? Do we have a switch?
If you could change one thing about what you see in communication, specifically to this social interest and social impact, what would it be? Is there something that's driving you crazy that you want us in communications to stop doing?
That's a great question.
All right, so we're just going to have one responder. So who wants to take this one?
It's not me.
Okay, I'll take it.
Okay.
Audience-centric thinking, right? Understanding your audiences. So much focus goes on message creation and great idea generation, but if it doesn't resonate with your audience, then you're missing the mission and the vision of what you're trying to do. So understanding deeply your audiences.
Great, thank you. Do we have another question? We need another mic over here.
It's on now.
Hello. So I guess I'll just be blunt. All of you that are on the stage pretty much look similar, right? By way of race, maybe there's different ethnicities, within all of you, but what are you doing or what can be done to add more color to this industry?
Sorry, by this industry, do you mean academia or do you mean your industry?
Your industry.
Okay, yeah, great.
Sure, so, I know.
Go for it.
Sure, so this is something
go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I know.
I forgot there was only one. Go ahead.
All right, am I going to have to get up here and take care of this? Or we good?
No, please, you go.
Who's going?
Sorry.
Hannah is.
Yeah, I mean, so the discussion in sociology in particular is about the pipeline and sort of starting people early, and there's so much that we can do at each stage about sort of getting kids interested in science, sort of in high school, in college, and then making sure that the transition to graduate school is actually something that works. So our discussion is like, we are trying to, our chair is going to high schools around New Jersey to kind of talk to kids, to talk to them about what science means so that we can get them early into the pipeline. There's so many initiatives to try to get students of color and underrepresented students to graduate school. I mean, my favorite thing about my department is how seriously they take that. It's not, so that that's just my personal experience, but it obviously needs to be so much more systematic than it is, but the pipeline is sort of what we're focusing on right now.
Can I answer this question?
I have to
okay,
do
I'm
one.
Answer it anyway.
You got to keep it fair, yeah.
But I can answer the question then. So I think what we have to do.
No, one per. We said
real
one
quick,
per.
I think we have to stop patting ourselves on the back. Because I think when we're in academic circles, we often feel like, oh, we have like some representation that's good enough, and we get complacent. And we think like, oh yeah, like, because the leaders are white, and we forget that we're not actually doing much. So we nod and we think we're doing well, and that just stops us from actually listening.
Okay, next question.
Oh, you have to get all
No,
Let
well,
Aaron. Let Aaron.
yeah, we've changed it now, so
Okay.
yes. I was trying to keep
Rules
it
are
fair.
going out of
The
the-
rules are out the window. Yeah. This is all going to get cut from the final show, I fear.
Sorry.
I don't know.
Sorry, Aaron. I feel passionately about this question.
I don't know. I'm
Erica
rethinking
doesn't.
my career, you guys. I don't know.
Okay, I guess I'll respond as well. So I think we need attention to the structural inequalities that exist, which means providing funding as well as local efforts, mentorships that exist between undergraduate students and professors, and demystifying that experience. I live on campus at the University of Houston, and so I engage with my students in the dining hall, and we're at a majority-minority university. So them seeing me in my jammies is a really small micro act that I think sort of humanizes faculty and researchers. Yeah, so.
Great, thank you. All right, another question. Annie's coming to you on the other side. Don't follow her. Annie wants that side. I think we have a research riff, please.
Hi. How do we get donors to take qualitative research more seriously and to really substantively use that in their understanding of situations
So
and
let's
projects?
do one response on this if we could. Everybody's gotten to respond once.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
I think the real challenge would be to have her answer that. No, not to get in sort of a turf war methodologically, but the reality is that numbers do drive funding, right? And so I don't think the answer is to replace the quantitative. I think it's to supplement it, right? To have those nuggets, to have, and this is where you can use your creative design elements and create short videos and narratives of those complementary to the data, the quantitative data, right? They don't exist in silos, and I'm not here to suggest that we should do one or the other. Rather, we should join forces of the research methods.
Anything we need to add? Are we good? Are we
Erica's
good?
expert on this.
We're good. All right, I think we're good. All right, one more question.
Oh, Candace looks like she has.
Thank you, because Chelsea, this is a question for you. So, well, I wanted to amplify the conversation that we had the other day about the work you're doing. And my question to you was, I don't think it's possible to bridge a divide with a white supremacist. So if you could expound on that.
Yeah, and I want to amplify Liz's perspective that she wants someone to say, like, you don't have to get everyone to like you. You cannot have a good conversation with someone who denies your humanity. Calling them evil might not help, but I can understand why I would want to do that. But there's some cases where this is worth the effort, but when someone strips us of our basic core part of being human, yeah.
All right, we have wrapped this section with several questions answered. Liz feeling happier and better, which is good. So this is good. So we're going to go to one final question for each of you.
Another one.
And we're going to start with you for this one, Hannah. Like I said, we're going to go back to this notion we started with. How can your research shape hearts and minds?
Yeah, so I think the goal is to use network thinking to identify key players in a group and amplify and magnify their on-message behaviors for greater behavior culture change.
Great, thank you. Erica?
Sure. So the idea from my research is really getting deeper into the people that you're trying to serve, amplifying, like you said, their voices through the really deep, rich narratives that they share, understanding the global and the local and how they work together in creating content.
Great, thank you. And Chelsea?
Sure, and I think my research can change hearts and minds by listening to other people. You validate them. You can start to have a conversation that doesn't just completely undermine their perspective.
Great, thank you. All right, so a couple things before we wrap this up. We're going to vote. Paper ballots, have you guys gotten your paper ballots? We have paper ballots, all right. So there are these two exits out of the theater. Annie and Troy are going to throw their bodies in front of those exits. You will only be allowed to leave if you vote. It would put into the ballot box. And because it's the Frank Show, they are sparkly ballot boxes. So find these sparkly ballot boxes, drop your ballot in, vote there, and please do not leave. So without doing the voting. So we want to thank our guests. Hearts and minds for everyone. Woo! There's more for all of you.
Oh, nice.
I just don't have 3 hands.
I love this.
Great. So thank you all very much, and we're going to keep moving along.
Thanks.
Very good. Very good. Very good. It's very exciting. I'm not sure it's legal to trap people in a room without voting, but I feel like that's America. Make sure you vote so Russian bots don't take over this election. I'd feel really good if this was a Facebook-free election. I feel like this is going to be the most democratic election we've had in a year and a half. So, I feel like we're nailing it. A couple of things. We're going to go to recess. So, again, just reiterating, we have the 2 people with the boxes, the Troys and the Annies and the Bejules. It really matters to vote. These people work really hard. Their research is really important. Really do it. We feel really excited about them. So let's make sure that you all weigh in. Yay. So you know how the research works. You know how to go to recess. You're super good at it by now. Don't forget that Nick Breeze is also doing a session. You'll see where he is if you want to participate in that. Hopefully you looked at your books. And the other thing I have to say is if we're going to try to keep our research and our lives intersectional, assess the tables where people are making decisions. If you did not see an intersectional space at that table, if it was not created by an intersectional group of people, avoid that table and build a new one and start there. Let's go to recess. Let's do some shit. Oh my God! Oh my God. Sit down. 11:15. Back here's when things start. So be back here 11:05 if you can. 11:15 at the latest. I'll be watching. Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Whoops.